There are only 3 ways this ends for Jo. She comes home quickly, she comes home after months of being negotiated over like a piece of intelligence property, or she doesn't come home at all. And in Lioness, Season 3, Episode 4, Kaitlyn tells Jo's husband to prepare for the third option, because if either of the other 2 happens instead, it'll feel like a relief. Here's everything that happens in Murder Hornets, why that final scene is the most devastating thing this show has done all season. The episode opens with Jo, still in captivity, being psychologically tortured via that dripping water mechanism from the premiere. Her interrogator, subtitled as Renat, though the show doesn't confirm that's reliable, gets an earful of Jo's actual political opinions on Russia. She calls it a failed monarchy, a failed democracy, and now a failing dictatorship. Jo using her captivity as an opportunity to lecture her captor rather than play it safe is completely consistent with who she's been established as all season, but it's also objectively reckless. She's stubborn to a fault, and the show doesn't pretend that's purely admirable. It's a flaw as much as a strength. Then, in the cold open proper, she's forcibly loaded onto a plane. Renat mentions home during this, which is about as unsubtle a hint as this show has given us about her likely destination, and it's not a good one. Here's the detail I love most in this whole sequence. The Russians didn't hurt Jo in that cell, because spilled blood is evidence they can't afford to leave behind. So Jo deliberately cuts herself on the leather strap holding her down, then shakes blood across the floor the moment her restraints come off, leaving a trail specifically for her team to find. That's Jo thinking 3 steps ahead even while restrained and being tortured. It's also why Kyle ends up executing one of the captured agents for information. The blood evidence confirmed she'd actually been there, which raised the stakes enough to justify going outside the rules. Unusually, the episode stays in the present timeline for a while. Kaitlyn and Byron sit down with Edwin Mullins to lay out exactly how bad this could get. Jo has intimate knowledge of the entire Lioness program, existing agents, future targets, operational details. If Russia leaks that information, it causes catastrophic geopolitical damage, particularly across the Middle East. But there's a worse scenario buried in there. If Russia hands Jo over to Iran as a gift, the information leak happens either way, but Jo herself would then be publicly tried, convicted, and executed. The team has 24 to 36 hours to find her, without telling the president.
That's a much scarier and more specific outcome, and giving it room to breathe in dialogue rather than just implying it raises the tension considerably.
Jo's team tracks her to the Maryland airfield. Kyle fights through the remaining Russian personnel and gets one of them to give up the tail number of the plane. Too late though, the plane's already airborne. No flight plan submitted. Locator disabled. Flying low enough to avoid detection. Kaitlyn lays out the rules of engagement bluntly. If the plane's found in US airspace, it gets forced down. If it's found in international airspace, it gets engaged, which is about as clear as military euphemism gets without actually saying the word.
The tail number lead paying off but arriving too late is a classic tension structure. Give the audience hope, then immediately take it away. It also raises the stakes of every subsequent scene, because now the team is racing an invisible target with an unknown destination. The engaged line doing all that work without spelling it out is good writing. The show trusts you to understand exactly what that means. If the plane's found in US airspace, force it down. If it's found outside US airspace, engage it. Which means, if necessary, destroying the plane with Jo still on it.
Byron admits to Mullins that in 6 months, YURIMOV has given them nothing usable. Either the intel he's shared was pre-planted to be discovered, or anything genuinely valuable had already been altered by the Russians before he was ever taken.
This lines up disturbingly well with Jo's fake YURIMOV theory from episode 2. If the man in custody isn't even YURIMOV if he's an actor, then Alexandra didn't hand the CIA a real asset. She handed them a trap, and the entire snatch operation was bait from the very beginning. And here's the part that really unsettles me. Alexandra never asked for anything in return for any of this. No demands, no payment, nothing. If she's playing both sides, the CIA sacrificing a fake prisoner in exchange for handing Russia a real, senior CIA officer is an absolutely catastrophic trade, and it might be exactly the trade the Russians engineered from day one.
Back in the past timeline, the fallout from last episode's high-speed school-run chase is still very present. Neal is genuinely scared for his daughters, and he's not thrilled about the idea of them needing to learn how to shoot in case danger shows up at their door again. Joe's response, that political assassinations have existed throughout all of human history, is not exactly comforting, but it's enough to smooth things over for now. After the press release breaks, Russian Deputy Ambassador Maxim Petrov requests a meeting with Byron, who shows up with an entire operation running in parallel around the sit-down. Amber undercover as a consultant, Alexandra quietly identifying assets in the room, backup watching Maxim's own agent. Kaitlyn tells Maxim the truth. An SVR agent voluntarily gave them information. Maxim can't believe a Russian agent would betray her own country, missing the fact that Alexandra is Ukrainian, not Russian.
That distinction is doing a lot of quiet work. Maxim's assumption reveals exactly the kind of blind spot that makes this whole operation possible in the first place. Maxim's real message, though, is the warning that matters. Russia lost something valuable, YURIMOV, and they want it back, but can't formally ask, since publicly admitting their own president's right hand was snatched off Russian-controlled territory would be humiliating. I think this is the exact moment the Joe kidnapping gets set in motion, even if it doesn't happen immediately. Maxim's essentially telling Byron, you'll have to give him back yourselves, because we can't ask. And if the CIA won't do that voluntarily, applying pressure by taking someone valuable of their own is the obvious next move. Byron eventually deciding to go public about having YURIMOV in the present timeline suggests he's finally connecting this conversation to what's happening now.
Meanwhile, Joe's actually enjoying her work for once. Operation Treasure is a wide-reaching undercover sting designed to identify who recruited the US senators under Alexandra's handling, since the layered structure of SVR asset management makes it genuinely unclear who's really pulling the strings. This gives us Cruz and Josefina working a mark together, with the kind of ease that shows exactly why the Lioness program works as well as it does.
This subplot is a genuinely fun tonal break from the dread hanging over the rest of the episode, and its smart placement giving the audience a breather before the ending lands its punch. The operation is still ongoing by the credits, which tells you it's setting up for more screen time next episode. Watch for that.
The episode closes back in the present, with Kaitlyn visiting Neal to deliver the reality of the situation. 3 possible outcomes. 1. Joe comes home relatively quickly, the best case. 2. She comes home eventually, but only after being negotiated over for months, possibly longer, as a high-value intelligence asset in a tense geopolitical standoff. 3. She doesn't come home at all. Given the stakes involved, Kaitlyn essentially tells Neal to prepare for the third outcome, because if either of the first 2 happens instead, it'll feel like a relief by comparison.
This is a brutal way to end an episode, and it's effective precisely because it's delivered so plainly. No dramatic music sting, no cliffhanger action beat, just a woman telling a husband the honest worst-case math. Joe's captivity situation is genuinely dire by the end of this episode, and the show earns that dread by walking through the actual logistics and consequences rather than just implying danger. Drop a like if Kaitlyn's 3 outcomes speech hit you as hard as it hit me. Subscribe for every Lioness Season 3 breakdown. I'll see you for Episode 5.